Hey guys, welcome to the Bill Barnwell Show. I am Bill Barnwell, very excited to hop on today. If you're listening to this on your favorite podcast feed, well, guess what? You can now watch this on YouTube as well. The Bill Barnwell Show is now on YouTube twice a week. Check it out there if you want to watch me talk with our many guests, one of which is here today. One of my favorites, a man who, I'm going to say it, he won't come out and say it, but I will say it. A man who is on a hot streak when it comes to his weekly betting column for us at ESPN. A man who is not just making you smarter, some would say he's making you money. That is the man who is joining us today to talk about two okay Monday Night Football games. Lots to discuss. Definitely newsworthy Monday Night Football games. Maybe not the most, put it this way. No one's going to be going back in May when we're missing football and think, man, I want to watch that Lions Bucs game where it was 24-9 and Mike Evans got hurt and it was really sad. This will not be high on the list, but a lot to discuss. Joining me today is my friend from ESPN, Seth Walder. Seth, how are you?
I am well. Thank you for the kind intro. Slightly, maybe slightly factually inaccurate. Coming off a losing
No,
week on the
no,
betting column. Yeah, I know. I know.
but Seth, we don't care. Seth, you and I, we don't care about 1 week results.
No, large sample.
How has it been doing for the season?
Very extremely well. Almost uncomfortably well.
See, that is, you have to pry it out of this man. He's trying to say, no, I'm regressing towards the mean. He is not. This man is on a heater. Seth, two interesting games to discuss. Let's go chronologically. Let's start with Lions Buccaneers, a matchup with two of the teams towards the top of the standings here in the NFC. Really a game the Lions seem to control from start to finish, from at least my perspective, watching that game. The big news, we'll start about the game itself, but the big news I did mention a little earlier, unfortunately, Mike Evans now out indefinitely, broken collarbone, also suffered a concussion on the play. We saw in this game, Emeka Egbuka was not his usual self, got 12 targets, but only turned them into about 58 yards on 4 catches. I guess I want to start with this, and we sort of have a lot of big picture conversations about roster building and the idea of how you build a team. If there was any position heading into the year, we would have felt like, oh no, this team is good. We do not need to add anybody. We are set. Buccaneers wide receiver would have been very high on that list. And now Mike Evans is out for most of the year. He was already missing time with a hamstring injury. Chris Godwin, who came back from his fractured fibula, has missed the last couple of weeks with a fibula injury. Emeka Egbuka he played a bunch of snaps, I think, out of necessity, but he was not his usual self this week. Jalen McMillan has not played, I believe, this year. He's been out for the entire year so far. Is it ever fair to say that you've done enough out of position, or should we always be thinking about the idea that we're going to have this sort of injury stack as a possibility? And how does that impact how you approach roster building? How does that approach, drafting? Like for a team like the Bucs, where they drafted Egbuka, and I don't think there was a lot of criticism, but there was definitely some conversation about like, well, should they have addressed, the defensive line? Should they have addressed their secondary? It kind of feels like Egbuka might be the guy who helps save them with all these injuries at wide receiver.
It's true. From a roster building standpoint, I think it's different at positions where you can have them all on the field at the same time. So when they drafted Egbuka, they didn't mean that they had to keep off Evans or Godwin or Egbuka. If they were all healthy, you could play them all. And so when you think about that, or at corner, it is different, I think, when you have a different position where it means like, oh no, actually one of these players is going to be on the bench. I think they are, even despite all of what you just said about their health, they are still in, a pretty good spot to weather a Mike Evans injury. So like, if we just imagine, hey, your top receiver goes down, how well are you gonna be able to handle this? It does depend on the health of a lot of these guys, but by and large, pretty good. You said Egbuka. I don't know. I'm not sure that he wasn't himself. Most of the passes that went his direction were wildly off target last night. So like there were, I don't know that I have a perfect feel that he wasn't himself. He got a ton of balls thrown his way. And so, yeah, if they can get Godwin back, Tez Johnson has also stepped up in a way that I think is meaningful, especially in the sense in a time when if Godwin remains out. That's going to be important for them. So I think overall, especially if they're looking at a situation where Evans can be back for the playoffs, it's about as good of a setup as you could reasonably ask for, considering you're losing your top receiver.
Yeah. Mike Evans now in his 30s, entering the final year of his deal, if I'm not mistaken. That's going to be a tricky spot now. Mike Evans' 1,000 yard streak, I would assume, coming to an end. Although I will say, if he manages to pull this off, Hall of Fame immediately. If he can get, you know how like there will be, I think this happened with Paige Beckers at Connecticut. I'm trying to think of other situations where like a player who has a serious injury will come in and like hit a layup to like extend a streak or score a point or like play a minute and then leave. I feel like NFL teams just like Mike Evans rack up like 800 yards in the final 2 weeks of the year when he comes back during the regular season, just to keep this 1,000 yard streak going. I'm just going to be so sad when I go to his Pro Football Reference page and there's not a 1,000 yard season at the bottom of it.
I know. So I'm on it right now. I'm looking at it and so clean. It was
Yeah,
so clean, and
yeah.
it's gone.
We think. We think.
We
We don't know.
think,
We can't say
yes,
for sure.
yes, back to back to back 300-yard games, and in the
Imagine
fantasy,
fantasy playoff
I
Hall
mean
of
fantasy
Famer.
playoffs. Oh, absolutely, exactly.
Incredibly incredible. It's going to be an interesting spot. I mean, that team, we sort of wondered, are they going to move on from Godwin? They re-signed Godwin to a pretty significant deal when the Patriots were looking after him. Um, they drafted Buka. You know, when they had Mike Evans hit free agency a couple of years ago, they didn't re-sign him before the market opened. Like he was on the market and then didn't really get that great of an offer. It came in lower than my expectations, a 2 year deal, mostly, pretty much entirely guaranteed. So it was like a legit 2 year deal. But we've seen wide receivers in this range. Terry McLaurin comes to mind. Cortland Sutton comes to mind. Get, I think, less maybe than people would expect given their talents, given their experience. We've seen teams be very hesitant with wide receivers on the wrong side of 30. Even someone like Devontae Adams, like got a decent deal from the Rams, really a 1 year contract, and a guy who was cut by the Jets a year after they traded a second round pick to acquire him. So do you think this is it for Mike Evans in Tampa Bay this year? Or do you think the fact that maybe there's not going to be that significant of a market makes it more likely that he comes back because there's just not a really meaningful deal waiting for him on the open market?
That's a really fair point, because my instant instinct was, oh, I mean, this is surely it,
Right.
because for all the things that we just said about the value of depth,
Mhm.
signing a 33-year-old receiver, going to be coming off of an injury that maybe
Yeah.
you don't necessarily expect to carry through to next year, but still, he's going to be
But he's
old.
already had the hamstring injuries this year. Last year, hamstring injuries cost him a few games. That doesn't help.
Absolutely. And when you draft someone like Ibuka, you don't know what you're getting. Now we know. Right. Now we know they hit there. So, and when you re-sign Godwin, I think there were injury concerns at the time. It was to some degree about 2026 and beyond. I think it's probably the end. I imagine that unless there are, and maybe there are feelings about, maybe Evans wants to stay, maybe he wants to play one more year and he just wants to do it in Tampa Bay. It'll take less to do it. I think that's probably within the cards. But if it's about, I would imagine someone else would pay him more because someone else is just going to have a bigger need.
Yeah, definitely a lot of teams who will need wide receivers every single year. Certainly Evans has that sort of pedigree and experience. You would assume next year it will also come with a raise for Baker Mayfield, who will be entering the final year of his contract. There's been plenty of MVP, certainly discussion about Baker Mayfield. I don't know that I'm on board with that necessarily, although can't argue with the fact that he's been great late in games, directly led to some victories, played really well in clutch moments, and that stuff does matter. The Baker MVP bandwagon may have shed some people last night, though. 28 to 50, 50 attempts, 228 yards, Seth. That is not a good ratio, as you, the analytics expert, I'm sure can attest to. A touchdown, a pick, no scramble yardage for him in this game. I guess I sort of asked, like, is there something you feel like represents the disconnect between the numbers for Baker, like sort of like the broader season-long numbers for Baker, and the perception that he has been an MVP candidate? Do you think that's overstating what he's done this year? Do you think it's fair to say, given the sort of the timing of when he's played really well?
That's a great question. I mean, because I've been fully out on the Baker MVP idea.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was just really nowhere, and his odds
Yeah.
were unbelievable. I mean, he was plus 300, I think,
Oh my
last week,
gosh.
uh, which to me was absurd. You in order to justify that, he hasn't even yeah. Okay, back up. I think the MVP race is over for your campaign is over for him. After this game, it was a high profile game where he really struggled. Is there a reason why? Yeah, I think ultimately the biggest reason is wins. I think that probably is just the answer. And to some degree, you could say if you're trying to forecast that there's some validity to that because typically the MVP is going to be on a 1 or 2 seed, and Tampa Bay had only one loss. They were perhaps headed in that direction, but he wasn't playing well enough. I mean, I think he was eighth in QBR heading into this game. He drops to 12th, and then these games, these primetime slots certainly move the MVP race more than the average game. And I think that it was apparent he was sailing throws uh, he had sailed throws to Ibuka, he had sailed throws to Tez Johnson. There were missed, there was a missed, I think, yeah, 2 missed touchdowns, really. Like he had the one to Ibuka that got broken up, but if he had just put more touch on it, it would have been there. And then and they missed Tez Johnson in the end zone as well. And they were just really just missed throws. Actually, there was a one earlier where Ibuka where it was late and short, and he had that would have been put the ball maybe at the one had that completed as well. So I think those accuracy issues, which were so apparent tonight, and I don't know that that's indicative of the year, though he does have oh no, yeah, he had a high off target rate
Mm-hmm.
this year so far than average. I think that's gonna knock him out of that race.
Yeah, I mean, when Troy Aikman is calling out your misses, you know, in real time, I think that's a pretty ominous sign. And Baker can be streaky. I mean, my argument with
Mm-hmm.
Baker, and this is the least analytically inclined argument I think I make, it's just that whenever Baker has nobody believing in him, he's great. And whenever people believe in Baker, he's kind of a mess. Um, I still think that's true. And maybe he saw the MVP odds and was like, oh, this is great. I am finally the people are behind me. And then he has one of his worst games of the season. No, I don't think that's the case. I'm being a little silly. But I do think that, you know, you can get this kind of game from Baker and just have to accept that that's kind of what you're paying for. Like, this is a guy making $33 million a year, which is not that much for an NFL quarterback. He's drastically exceeded expectations in key moments this year. The Bucs, they're a good team, but they have not been blowing teams out. They've not been dominating teams, even compared to what they did last year. Remember, right around this time, not right around this time, but week 4 last year, they blew out the Eagles, and right before the Eagles bye, and the sort of the point where things shifted for Philadelphia and they became the best team in football. The Bucs have that in them, but they have not done that really, to my knowledge, to my recollection, at any point this year, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, it's been a lot of one-score games, a lot of getting down to the final drive and having Baker sort of, figure things out. They did play the Niners very well and beat the Niners last week. So maybe that's the exception, but I mean, narrow wins over the Falcons, the Texans, the Jets, a narrow loss to the Eagles where they launched a comeback, a narrow victory over the Seahawks where it kind of felt like, they get that late interception to kind of swing things. But it's just sort of hard to get a handle on the Bucs. And maybe this is true of a lot of teams after 7 games, but just sort of feels like they're playing a lot of coin flip games. They've now had one game against the Niners where they were the better team pretty comfortably, and now one game against the Lions, they're also pretty comfortably the worst team. And sort of feels like they're pretty much a 8-9 win team, which is sort of where I expect them to be before the year. But maybe they've just banked enough wins that they should be considered pretty comfortable favorites in the NFC South. I mean, how do you feel about the Bucs relative to their competition in the NFC South?
They rank 15th in FPI overall,
Yeah.
according overall in the league, not just in the South. And so I think that fits exactly with what you said. They're probably an 8 or 9 quality or win quality team, but because they have 5-2 record, and because they have the 31st most difficult remaining strength of schedule, which is the NFC South gift that keeps on giving, They will end up better than that. I think that to me that makes them it's one of the reasons why I would have zero qualms, even after watching the game last night, about them winning the division. I don't I'm not I wouldn't be concerned in any way if I were them. They're going to get to maybe 11 wins. I think that's totally within the ballpark, and then they could still be an extremely average team.
Yeah, I mean the NFC South, you do not need to be good to win the NFC South. You can be an average team, and it's just been tough to sort of get a handle on this team. I think because they've been so inconsistent on the defensive side of the ball. That's always been Todd Bowles' strength. That's where he comes from.
Mhm.
Of course, you did you cover the Jets when Todd Bowles was there?
I did.
Okay, I got my time frame correctly. Um, I think Todd Bowles is a very good defensive coach, but they've been erratic on defense. In this game, I thought, frankly, they did a pretty good job with the Lions and Jared Goff. You did go up that long touchdown to Jahmyr Gibbs, which was, I mean, just sheer explosiveness, just like an incredible. He got Jared Goff has been signaling touchdown really early this year. Like when you watch the L22, like Jared Goff's been signaling touchdowns like 2 yards past the line of scrimmage, even though it hasn't always worked out that way. This was one where it felt like when Jahmyr Gibbs got to the second level, I was like, oh no, this is not going to go well. Poor Antoine Winfield is just like starts running, and it's like, no, I'm sorry. You're a great player. You're a all pro caliber safety. You have no hope of getting Jahmyr Gibbs. And Todd Bowles did say they misfit the run there. But overall, I thought they did a really good job against Jared Goff and this passing game. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown got something early. Got some, they clearly wanted to get him back in the offense after. I'll get to that in a second. Actually, I want to talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown and that situation. But felt like they took his first read away, had some sim pressures that worked, got him under pressure in moments, and I mean, got Jared Goff off his spot, off his first read, and then that is usually how you cause Jared Goff to struggle. But I thought overall, given that the Lions had a ton of drives in this game, the Bucs did not have a lot of consistent offensive, sustained drives. They had a bunch of misses, like you said, on Tampa Bay, but it felt like 24 points was not unreasonable given, how many opportunities the Lions had in this game.
I agree. So in the beginning of the game, they when I looked, and I'd read about this before the game, so I was paying close attention, but there was like a moment early in the game when if you looked at the coverage numbers, I mean, Servassier Dennis had allowed 5 targets, 5 receptions, and I think no one else had been targeted more than twice at that point. And like, I was thinking about it because a minute ago I just said extremely average for the Bucs. I think that might be a shade harsh. I think that they have some fixable issues. I mean, they can get Luke Gedeke back at right tackle, and I know you and Derek talked about this on the trade show last week, but like bringing in a linebacker so that Servassier Dennis is not in coverage, I think would also help them quite a bit. And considering they had that issue early in the game, then they give up the long run. I agree with you overall. I thought they played really well given that context. And I think that's a fixable issue.
Yeah. It's been sort of a tough thing for them. I think they are sort of they have some spots in the lineup where they don't really have any other choice. On the offensive line, obviously, with the injuries to Gadeke, a couple other spots they've had guys banged up. Tristan Wirfs wasn't playing early in the year. They sort of had to just kind of stick guys in and hope and pray they were going to work out. So actually, Dennis has been playing since week one. I mean, that's the first point where I noticed him that really long. I think one of the first long touchdown of the year, the Bijan Robinson catch on the flat, where he couldn't even get close enough to miss a tackle on Bijan Robinson. And I was like, okay, like Bijan Robinson is fast, man. Like I'm not going to say that I'm not going to criticize someone for not being able to make a tackle there, but when you can't even get close enough to attempt a tackle, it doesn't seem like it's a particularly good thing. And we've seen teams pick on Dennis throughout the year. And I think that's sort of a tough spot because the Bucs clearly love Devontae David. They clearly think he's a valuable player, and Devontae David is still a really smart, instinctual player, but he's not the guy he was even 5 years ago during the Super Bowl run. They really need a burst of athleticism next to Devontae David. And so a little surprised they did not do more to kind of get a more athletic player next to David in the lineup this offseason.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that's a fixable issue. I know you
Yeah,
guys talked about Jordan Brooks. I don't have a name like off the top of my head,
sure.
but I think that at the deadline, that's a spot where they can and should upgrade because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's just a spot that needs to be done. That week
Mm-hmm.
one tape of Dennis, against the Falcons is some of the most ridiculous. I watched it last week because I was writing about him, and some of the most ridiculous plays I've watched. So
It's tough.
it needs to be done. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we saw in this game, Jamel Dean was getting bench or stretches. They played Benjamin Morrison,
Yes.
day 2 pick, for part of the game at cornerback, on the outside. The Amon-Ra St. Brown thing was so interesting because here's a guy. Oh my God, I'm doing the Romo. Here's a guy. Amon-Ra St. Brown has maybe the best hands in football. I think he's led in catch rate over expectation last year. I don't think he had a single drop last year. Had like a historically great catch rate. He drops one pass, and it wasn't even like a crazy drop. It was like, it wasn't like it was an awful, oh my God, how'd you drop this, sure touchdown kind of drop. And he's like apologizing to the team. Like they're like, oh, we have to get him the ball early in the game to get him back on track. Like, he's great. Like, it was there anybody, like, I felt like the idea that like he was getting widely criticized for this drop was just totally unwarranted and uncalled for.
I totally agree. It also sort of took me by surprise, and I was like, I don't feel like
it was a
I don't
drop,
feel like
and it
that's
happens.
Yeah, I agree.
It was so strange.
It's just one of those. I mean, but obviously they were talking about it, so I guess reasonable to bring up.
Bad. I felt like someone needed to tell him, like, no, you're great. Like, do not get so down on yourself about this. On the Lions side, on the defensive side of the ball, we do see some pressure from them in this game, but only 4 sacks on 54 dropbacks for the Lions. In my trade column this past week, I know you love a fake trade. I love a fake trade. Did had them going all in, trading for Trey Hendrickson, trading for Jalen Phillips. They do get a Lee McNeil back in this game. I thought he played really well in flashes, made some impact plays, got some pressure. Do you think they should go out and get somebody to help Aiden Hutchinson, who I believe, according to the numbers you posted on social media, was chipped at a historic rate in this game? And in addition to, do you think they should get someone? I have to ask you, Seth, do you think Brad Holmes will go out and get somebody to help his pass rush?
So Hutchinson was chipped at a crazy rate in the first half. It dropped off in the second half. He still was one of the most, I think it was, I want to say top 5 highest chip rate games this season. So, I mean, that's still pretty dramatic. And I think that the pressure numbers would give you the impression that the pass rush was better than it was. Baker Mayfield's time to throw was 3.2 seconds. The Lions' pass rush win rate was not good in this game. If you look at Hutchinson's pass rush win rate was not good. Muhammad's was definitely better, but it was below average. And that's also back to, even if you want to count a different way, you look at time to pressure. Hutchinson only had 2 pressures that came faster than the average pressure time. That's really important. Not every quarterback is going to be holding the ball as long as Baker Mayfield. And it's true that Hutchinson is a player that can maybe excel in sort of like the second half of the pass rush. There's value to that. It's not like you just turn into a pumpkin at 2.5 seconds. Sure. But I think it can be misleading when we look at those pressure numbers. This is a long way of me coming around to saying, yes, I do think that they should acquire someone. I think Muhammad has played pretty well this year. Yeah. Like, I believe that in the sort of breakout, do they need to get Jalen Phillips and Trey Hendrickson? I'm gonna say just Hendrickson would do the trick for me. Just to go out and acquire last year's sack leader, and you'll be.
Yeah. I wrote before the Bengals win, though. Now I don't know if they'll make him available. They might say, listen, we got Joe Flacco. We're back on track. Joe Flacco had, according to the commentary, the greatest game any quarterback has ever played, where he posted a negative CPOE and averaged, I think, a below league average rate of yards per attempt. But maybe they think they're good with Joe Flacco. Maybe he's not available anymore.
I think it's totally reasonable that he might, or totally possible that he's not available. I would add someone, though. I think there will be people available. I think Phillips is a good potential target. Yeah, I think that if you can add one person and then make Muhammad your third, that is great. That to me is good. You really do want to have 3 ideally, and I would count him to be like good enough in that group. And I agree that McNeil did a really nice job pushing that pocket and getting pressure himself in this game as well. So to me, I would add. What was the question? Should they? Would they?
Should they? Would they?
I think yes, yes. I think yes, yes.
Really?
Oh, I
Rams has
mean,
not been aggressive adding people.
you added
Uh,
Zadarius Smith last year.
did they? I mean, I guess that's true. You're right. I forgot about Darius Smith, who did retire this past week. Very, very
He did
curiously.
retire. I have a regrade story. I think it's probably just came out from last year's trade deadline. So I was just rewriting up that
Yeah.
trade and how it how it looks in retrospect. And so it was top of mind. I still think like
Makes
it
sense.
was a very
Yeah.
reasonable move for them to have made. They didn't.
Yeah.
You don't have to win the Super Bowl for it to be a good trade.
Right. You don't have to win the Super Bowl for it being a good trade. I do, and this is the last thing I have about the Lions. Then we'll move on to the other game. A topic that is very thorny, and I feel like only very few people I trust to have this conversation with, and you're one of them.
Oh.
The Jahmyr Gibbs trade. You see moments like what Jahmyr Gibbs did last night, and you're like, man, that dude is awesome. I want that guy on my team. He's so much fun. He's so good, and he was incredible. On that play. Obviously, David Montgomery's broken some big runs, but I don't know that David Montgomery takes that to the house. Jahmyr Gibbs does, and you sit there and you're like, man, great player. Happy we got that guy in the first round. They drafted Jack Campbell in the first round. Jack Campbell had a pretty good game, and Jack Campbell's fine inside linebacker. And you're like, man, okay, happy we have Jack Campbell. Still kind of feel like they should have maybe drafted a more premium position with at least one, if not two, of those first round picks. And you end up in a spot where, this team has fallen in the playoffs the last couple of years. Obviously, the fact that they had pretty much every one of their defensive players get hurt last year, maybe I don't know if one first round pick makes a difference if they have one other guy they like. The year before, Niners, they blow a big lead. The defense is not able to hold up. You have replacement level guys in the secondary, and Kindle Vildor having balls bounce off his helmet. They've had to rely on some players who are there who have been, kind of cast offs or journeyman, and Meek Robinson playing a big role for them. And I think he's been actually pretty good since he joined the Lions. But how do you sort of handle this idea of like the Jahmyr Gibbs you have in hand, who's a really good running back, who's going to get paid next year, probably $20 million a year, probably reset the running back market or be at the top of the running back market. How do you weigh that versus sort of what you don't see, which is the missing maybe edge rusher or missing cornerback or missing defensive piece they could have added at a premium position that might have made the difference for them, as opposed to having a lesser running back than Jahmyr Gibbs?
It's a really good question. It's timely because last night Lions fans dug up all my tweets that were very critical of them from that draft, and we're asking me how I felt now.
How do you feel? I said, to be clear, I did not send any of those tweets. I just want to clarify.
You didn't send any tweets criticizing them at the time, or you didn't?
No, I do send you other tweets from sock puppet accounts criticizing decisions you made in the past, but I was working. I was working, so I did not send any of those.
That's right. On your off time, you do that.
Yes. I mean, come on, who doesn't?
I think that, look, they hit on those players, so
yeah,
it obviously worked out to some degree, but this is the whole idea of what we talk about when we talk about premium positions, is that you are able to replace these other players much more easily. If the Lions needed a running back right now, I would have no qualms about their ability to get an average starter in the trade market at the deadline. If we just talked about the Bucs needing a linebacker, am I concerned that there's going to be none available that will be an upgrade for them? No. Now, it's true they're probably going to be able to get an edge rusher, and they might even be able to get lucky and get a good one at the deadline. But it is just so much harder and so much more costly to add edge rushers, tackles, other premium positions in free agency at the trade deadline. It is this thing that we don't see. In fact, all of running back stuff is like that, because I always think about how you see these amazing runs and everybody always says like, who else? See, that's why you need a running back, right? But we never look at the 2-yard run that that maybe another person would have turned into 6 or whatever. And I think Gibbs is awesome. I want to ask you something about that. But the other thing about that draft was, and man, this criticism, which I've kept up and is looked just terrible over and over again is that they reached for all of these players. So the thing about that draft is they probably could have had Gibbs and Campbell each drafted one selection later and then taken a player at Gibbs was 12 or 14 at 12, right? So he could have taken another player at 12 and then still gotten those other guys. And I mean, man, they have reached over and over again and they have hit over and over again. So I don't know. I am starting to get worried about that critique. Like Isaac Tesla was one,
Yeah.
like was by the way, it's not like just our numbers. Like when they take
Mhm.
Isaac Tesla, like I get texts from people in the league being like, what? What? Uh, and I think you can't lose sight of the positional value, even though they hit on those guys. I don't want to come off like I'm not saying this has worked out so much better than I thought it would for them because it
Sure.
because it clearly has.
But there's like two things can be true, right? This idea that like Jahmyr Gibbs is a great running back. Glad if you're gonna draft a running back, make sure you get a great one. Don't take a bad
Yeah.
one in the first round. It does happen, unfortunately. The Jags taking Leonard Fournette at 4 a few years ago
Mhm.
in a deep draft class. The Raiders. We'll see what happens with Ashton Johnson. I don't think what's happening in Vegas is his fault, but I do think that the reality is the production has not consistently been there for the 8th overall pick or top 10 pick. I believe the 8th overall pick, but I might be getting it wrong. A really highly drafted running back for a team that had so many problems elsewhere on their roster. And with the Lions, Gibbs is great, but you know, could they have drafted an edge rusher at 13 and then signed Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry last year in free agency? Was a Derrick Henry caliber edge rusher available? Was a Saquon Barkley caliber edge rusher available? No, those guys very rarely, if not never, hit the market. And so it's tough because Jahmyr Gibbs can be a great running back and be exactly the player the Lions wanted. I just think, and you mentioned this, like it's just so hard to find those premium players, those guys who are tremendous difference makers. And the Lions have one in Hayden Hutchinson. I just would like to see what things would have been like if they possibly had another one. Seahawks 27, Texans 19, the other game from last night's doubleheader, potentially the final doubleheader in Monday Night Football history. Um, I'm not going to say I will miss them, if I'm being honest with you. But again, a tough game for the road quarterback, CJ Stroud. 23 or 49 for 229, a touchdown, an interception, a near safety. Um, it really did feel like if you were going to sum up year 2 and year 3 of the CJ Stroud experience and wanted to show someone who saw CJ Stroud in year 1 game and be like, this is what's happened and this is why CJ Stroud is not living up to expectations. And to be clear, I'm not putting all of that or even a majority of that on CJ Stroud. Just if you wanted to show someone this is what's happened, this is why CJ Stroud has not taken that leap it seemed like he was ready to take after his first season, this would be a perfect game to show people because the entirety of this game, he is struggling to get the opportunity to throw. He has free rushers on him. He has guys getting beat up front. He's in third and long spots. His footwork is inconsistent because you could see this as a guy who just has no faith that he's going to have pass protection and time to throw.
This game on that side of the ball was one of those where if you imagined going into it, like what's this game going to look like?
Yeah.
It sort of unfolded exactly what at least what I
Yep.
imagine, right? It's like, okay, they're going to try to run the ball and it's going to go really poorly. And then CJ Stroud is going to be in all these very clear passing situations against a Seattle pass rush that when it knows you are in a clear passing situation is going to tee off against their offensive line. I don't know that I thought it was going to even be that poor on the running game,
Mm-hmm.
but
15 of 31 for their 2 running backs in this game.
is really bad. I have some numbers on that in a second, but like, yes, I think that it really was. Yes, they are it was a brutal spot for Stroud. It went really poorly. It is hard to evaluate him in that spot. I don't want to give like a total pass.
Yeah, that's what I
Uh,
wanted to ask you is like, how much of this do you pin on CJ Stroud at this point?
it's been too long, I think, where to give him a total pass. I think he got a lot of we got a lot of benefit of the doubt last year, and that that made sense. He was coming off this great rookie season. I don't know that the just in general, I think when we're evaluating players, it's good to look at context. It's good to look at all the things around them. But I think that you can't put yourself in the trap of always sort of making excuses for them. And it's not that I have a specific situation where I'm saying like, look, this one was on him. This one was on him. It's just one of those where after enough time, we have to recognize what we're seeing.
I'll give you one that I feel like
Okay.
was on him. I'll go back to that first drive and the safety that was
Safety, it
not a
wasn't.
safety, and then it was a safety, and then it wasn't a safety for the Houston Texans. That's a play where you need to do something that's not drift backwards to your own end zone and take a sack. Like, you can say there's too much pressure on him, and there was. You could say that you don't want to take a sack, and you don't. What you don't want to do is drift backwards and then take a sack. That's what Cam Ward does. That's what Jackson Dart does. That's what
That's what
rookie
I do in
quarterbacks do.
Madden.
That's what you do in Madden. That's what I would do in Madden. That's what you do when you're just like, I'm going to run 5 yards backwards and then figure out a solution once I get there. That's what a lot of people can do in college. That's not what you can do at the NFL and succeed. If you're Lamar Jackson, if you're Josh Allen, if you're Patrick Mahomes, you can get away with that. Pretty much anybody else cannot. And that to me is on CJ Stroud because you have to know when to fold him. To quote a song. This was a situation where like it sucks. You don't want to have a free rusher on you. You don't want to punt, but like what he did was almost incredibly disastrous, almost like a 4-point swing when you consider the expected value of the ensuing drive the Seahawks would have got had CJ Stroud taken a safety. That's on him. That is not entirely on him, but it's mostly on him and how he handled a rough spot. And we saw he missed some throws in this game, not always from clean pockets. He did have some nice throws from clean pockets, but certainly you can expect to have clean pockets every drive in the NFL. You can expect to have clear opportunities to throw the football. If you do, great. Like, it's nice if that happens, but it did feel like even given the pressure he was getting in this game, he was struggling more than you would hope your quarterback would struggle. And I don't know if that's just CJ Stroud struggling, don't know if it's just a bad game, dealing on the road, not having great receivers, or if it's sort of like a cumulative effect of having now a year plus where he has gone into every single week not knowing whether he's going to have time to throw, whether his pass protection is going to hold up.
I think that's right. That makes sense. I didn't feel like, and I don't have any numbers here, I certainly didn't feel like he had guys running wide open, schemed open for most of this game.
He had a negative 13% CPOE under pressure in this game.
That's right. But I think his expected completion probability, at least when I looked in like the third or fourth quarter, was also extremely low.
So 41% expected completion percentage.
Expected completion percentage?
Yes. Yep.
I mean, that's absurdly low.
Sure.
So wait, his expected was 41.
His expected was 41. He was 4 14 for 55 yards with a touchdown and a pick, a 28.6% actual completion percentage in this game.
Right. So I think that does tell us expected completion percentage is going to be a mix of scheme. It's going to be about quarterback decision making, when they throw, who they throw to. Yep. It's going to be about the receivers. It's a mix of it, but it's not all going to be on him. So, I mean, that's a pretty rough number for around him.
Yes, but both things can be true, right? Like,
both things can be true. Yes,
he can be put in tough spots and then not be doing well within those tough spots. And I feel like that's where I sort of settled on him in this game. Now, to be fair, without pressure, he was 19 to 35 for 174, which is not exactly great for not having pressure on you in this game. And that's where I think maybe the cumulative effect of just not trusting. Okay, like, there's no one on me here. Like, I have time to throw. Like, it's almost like a surprise to CJ Stroud. And I just think that we were hoping things were going to be different. The Texans go out, they basically change their entire offensive line, a line change offensive line, which you don't really see very often for NFL teams in a single offseason. They fire Bobby Slowick, who had been a highly touted head coaching candidate the offseason earlier. They hire Nick Caley from the Rams, and it just feels like this is the same season they were having last year with new people. It doesn't feel like they have any hope running the football. They did lean more towards Woody Marks in this game, although Woody Marks was not good running the football in this game. And it just felt like, drive after drive, CJ Stroud was being sent out to slaughter by a coaching staff that was not going to give him the solutions he needed.
The running game was what stood out to me most. This was so extreme. It's what you would have expected going against Seattle's defense with Houston's offense.
I would have hoped for more than 2 yards.
But you would have hoped. Okay, here's one of the craziest numbers. So they had a 33% success rate on design carries in this game.
Yep.
That's actually above average for Houston this year.
Oh my gosh.
That's their third best success rate game.
That's
terrible. And I'm watching it being like, I only looked it up because I was like, this has to be their worst, right? Yeah. It's actually a little bit of a cautionary tale against success rate, I would say, because like that's going to treat, they were over 3 on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1.
Yeah.
And now, to be clear, their EPA per design rush, -0.56, which is obviously actually their worst. This was obviously their worst game.
Sure.
Can you think about how absurd that is? Every 2 times you run the ball, you lose a point.
A point. They cost themselves a touchdown, a little over a touchdown running the football in this game. Oof. And it's not like even those 3rd and 4th and 1s, they weren't even close.
No, not even close.
It wasn't like they got to the line and like Woody Marks didn't fall forward. Like they had guys in the backfield in every one of those runs.
And wait, I don't even know if that counts the one. It doesn't count. That I said gave you that stat. That almost certainly doesn't even count that play where they got stuffed, but it was actually a false start. So
yes.
At the goal line, so they go back. So that one was also not close. So
yes, and you had a CJ Stroud fumble that was almost a touchdown, but the Seahawks fumbled it at the 1-yard line, and the Texans recovered it not for a safety, but for a touchback. Former Jet Braxton Berrios making a heady play there.
That's right. That was a wild play. A lot of almost safeties.
Yeah. Yeah, if you had a safety prop in this game, I am sorry.
Oh, yeah.
You were harsh. And the Texans even got a defensive touchdown on they recovered a Sam Darnold fumble in the end zone where if the Seahawks fall on that's a safety.
Right. That's right.
Oh man.
That's right.
Brutal run out for your safety prop if you had that.
Thank God they didn't have that one.
But yeah, I mean the Texans offense just feels completely broken, and it just feels like you've wasted now the 2, I would assume, final years of CJ Stroud's cheap rookie contract. I assume they're still going to pay him after this year. There's nothing to think that, they should not do that, but just sort of a tough spot for them. And Nico Collins goes out in this game with a concussion. Don't know if he's going to be able to play next week on a short week. It's been tough. The Texans did have that 2-game stretch where they looked like they were back on track. They blew out Tennessee. They blew out the Ravens backups on defense. And now it feels like you're back to square one. It feels like all that progress you made as kind of just, once you played a real defense, suddenly you realize that you're not anything different than you were earlier in the year when you were getting off to a really rough start.
Well, you just said something I thought was interesting. I mean, you're right. Okay, I'm giving you another job. Sorry, Nick Caserio, Barnwell's taken over.
I've been fired. Yeah.
You're the Texans GM.
Great.
And I just want to know, you're saying you'd be rushing out to give Stroud a big contract for this year. I'm not so sure I would.
You're not so sure, really?
Oh, I mean, why? I can just okay, if I pay CJ Stroud, it's going to be one of these, top 5 at the moment, sort of.
I would assume it's going to be $62.5 million. I think he's going to get the deal that tops the Dak deal.
But you could just pick up the option. Now you have 2 years left, and you can give yourself a little more time to find out. So there's value in signing someone early when you're certain, because you're getting ahead of the market. It's going to save you money in the long run. That all makes sense when you're sure. Are you sure you want to tether? You want to lock yourself in with after what we've seen over the last year and a half? I'm not certain. I think that's like probably where I go, but do I want to lock myself in at this moment when I have an easy out? Like if his contract were up, then yes, I would sign it. But when you have the option to keep the flexibility.
So am I answering this question as someone who's making the most logical decision, Or am I answering it as someone who am I answering it as myself or as Nick Caserio? Nick Caserio's been fired, or I'm inhabiting Nick Caserio's body to
No,
make
Nick
this
has been
decision.
fired. You're
Okay,
the new GM.
because I think that does make a difference in how I answer this question. Because from
Mhm.
my perspective, I could totally see your point in saying, let's wait and see. We don't have to be in a rush. Like, we can do what we need to do at the cap. Let's use another year of a cheap CJ Stroud deal, both in terms of cash and cap, to add more pieces around CJ Stroud, because very clearly we do not have enough around CJ Stroud to get the most out of our young quarterback who we feel good about. If I'm being John Malkovich, if I'm being Nick Casario, that's different because Nick Casario has tied his future to Will Anderson and CJ Stroud, the two guys he drafted very high in that same draft with Jahmyr Gibbs, where the Lions, I think, traded out of the Will Anderson pick, or the Cardinals traded out of the Will Anderson pick. Yes, the Cardinals traded out of it, and then they
Yeah,
traded
and they
up with the
traded back up for
Lions
Paris
to get
Johnson.
Paris
Yeah,
Johnson. So
and the Lions took Jahmyr Gibbs. It's all coming
yes,
around.
worked out really well. So I do think you sign CJ Stroud and Will Anderson just to prove, like, hey, listen, we got our guys. Like, we are locked in at two of the most important, maybe the two most important positions on the field in football. I think he's going to do that because it gives him more security and locks him in for a guy clearly he believes in. I don't think it's unwarranted to believe in him, but I do see your point in that I'd be a little hesitant to make that move.
Yeah, that's I agree. I think that's what he will do, but
Yes.
what should you do is is a
Yes.
different question. At
On
least
the
an
flip
open
side,
question.
on the flip side of this game, the Seattle Seahawks, a team that did make a unexpected change at quarterback with Geno Smith taking over for Sam Darnold. There's been MVP discussion, not as much as Baker Mayfield, but MVP discussion about Sam Darnold, whose numbers have been excellent this year. This was not his best performance. 17 of 31 for 213, a touchdown, a pick, I believe a lost fumble in the end zone for a touchdown where he ran into Will Anderson essentially. Some great throws from Sam Darnold in this game, no question. But was this sort of game that, reminded people about why maybe the Vikings were comfortable moving on from Sam Darnold, even though they didn't know what they had at quarterback and JJ McCarthy and then eventually Carson Wentz?
A little bit. Yeah. I think on the flip side though, like I would not be panicked about Sam Darnold, and I've been very critical of him like over his entire career. He's been really good this year. I mean, I'm like, isn't it really, and this is not analytically inclined, but confidence inspiring that he gets that strip right after Will Anderson, and then he just drops this ball right in the bucket to JSN right after that. And it's like, oh no, this is not the unraveling Sam Darnold that we saw at the end of his Vikings tenure. This guy is different. And he also had, like you said, I mean, that first touchdown to JSN was an elite throw under pressure, zips it in there. I think that this was a down game for
Mm-hmm.
him. That Will Anderson play was like very concerning to me as a guy watching as someone he's taken sacks, and
Yeah.
that was a sack that was on the quarterback,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was sort of a long time to sack. He just hung in there and then
And loses the fumble as well. Not
yeah,
just
and
getting sacked, but also
loses the fumble, goes right he puts himself right into
yeah.
Anderson and then loses the fumble on its touchdown. That's a sort of disaster play. It's obviously particularly costly considering where he was in the field. I don't know. He earned enough through the first 6 weeks for me that I'm not that worried here after week 7. And man, I cannot tell you how crazy it sounds for me to say that about Darnold because I spent all last year being like he's not that good. The Vikings are just winning. They have an elite defense. And I spent his whole Jets tenure saying how bad
That
he
was a little
was, and that I
easier,
can't
to be
believe they
fair.
got it. That's true, and how I can't believe they got a second round pick from Carolina for him, and
Yeah.
on and on and on. He was. I feel like this is not a panic situation for Darnold and the
Yeah.
Seahawks.
Yeah, maybe I'm mischaracterizing how I'm framing it. I don't think there's a reason to think you should be panicked, think he's about to fall off a cliff. Maybe just like the range of things you see from
Yes,
Sam Darnold in a given week, a given game, a given season. It felt like we got maybe a wider swath of sort of the positives for Sam Darnold. Like I said, some great throws, but definitely the negatives in terms of maybe some of the mistakes, some misses here or there. In a game where he had a better running game, certainly, than CJ Stroud and the Texans did. His defense or his offensive line did a better job. They allowed some pressures here or there. There was some penetration here and there. The Texans did have their pass rush get home a few times, but certainly had more help. JSN was awesome in this game, as usual. He's been so phenomenal this year. And then the Seahawks defense. I mean, just living in the backfield in this game against the run, creating pass opportunities. They honestly could have had a bunch more interceptions in this game. They dropped a couple, had a couple more that like were, in a dream scenario you catch them. In reality, you probably don't. But they could have had 4 or 5 picks in this game. Are they the best defense in football to you?
I don't think I would say they're the best defense in football.
Who
I
would you say
would.
the best defense in football is?
Hmm,
I asked you this question and did not know what the numbers say.
I know now. Like, you see, it's like
They are 8th in EPA per play on defense.
Yeah,
Do you know who is number 1 in EPA per play on defense right now?
Is it Houston?
The Houston Texans.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe that explains why Sam Darnold did not have a great game because he was playing the best defense in football.
Okay, what I was gonna say is that I do think you mentioned the offensive line, like considering who they were playing against, I thought it was a really strong performance.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably say if I had to pick a defense, I'd probably pick Denver if I wanted one. Seattle's run defense is obviously outrageous. I think, they're and now I'm seeing, yes, 7th, or you said 8th, well, whatever, 7th or 8th in EPA per play. Yeah, Houston's got a great. I think Denver to me is what I would choose for the most complete defense. Who would you choose?
They did just get allowed a bunch of points to Jackson Dart and the New York Giants. So I'm not
you
sure
can't stop the lead. I don't know.
Are a great offense. I would probably pick Seattle, and maybe I'm sort of filling in some gaps here because they are not as good against the pass, but they haven't had Devon Witherspoon for most of the year. They did not have Julian Love in this game. I mean, they've been down at least one, if not multiple starters in their secondary pretty much every week this year, and have still looked outside of the Buccaneers game pretty darn good. They can rush the quarterback. I think they do a great job with their sim pressures of creating free rushes at the quarterback.
Yes.
I mean, it just, they have guys leveling up. Josh Job's been good this year at cornerback. Byron Murphy's taking a step forward. They're getting more out of Jaron Reed, who was really good in this game, than I think other teams have, including the Seahawks in years past. I just feel like, they are such a complete defense. Like you said, so good against the run. I mean, the Texans did not have a hope of running the football in this game. And I do think once they get Witherspoon back on the field, they're going to be really good. That's a Pro Bowl caliber cornerback they've barely had this season.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. I mean, they're great. I'm not.
No, but
they're great.
Being the best,
McDonald adds with, you mentioned the sim pressures and what I think he adds too. He had a double corner blitz get home in this game. He had a safety blitz with a sim pressure. That was on I think a key third down, and the safety got home, but it was like 5 against 6, and they had an unblocked rusher. Like that's McDonald doing his job. So I think they're good. Yeah, they're certainly good enough to make them very dangerous.
Yes. Last question for you about this game. What would the experience of being at this game have been like as a Seattle sports fan? Because the Seahawks are winning. Clearly, you are enough of a Seahawks fan that you're going to the game. Maybe you're a season ticket holder. Maybe you're a really hardcore Seahawks fan. It's Monday Night Football, prime time. You know that the country is watching. Some of us are asleep on the East Coast, but the country is watching the Seahawks. You have this reputation as somehow having lost your home field advantage at Lumen Field, which I think is mostly variance, but there's certainly been that conversation about, we have to get our home field advantage back. We can only run on the road. And presumably you're a Seattle Mariners fan. If you're a Seattle Seahawks fan, the Mariners are playing a much more important game, and they lose, I believe, during it was during the Seahawks game where they threw up the home run and then lose the game. are you enjoying yourself? Like what is your experience like being at that game, knowing, the Seahawks, the Mariners, who have taken over the city, just lost, and you're at a Seahawks game where they're winning, but they're not like it's a good game, but it's not like an oh my god we're scoring 45 points kind of game. It's not a fun game necessarily, just a game where you're winning.
Well, I think this is a Mina question, really, but I would say, yeah. Well, it's hard though because everything's selection bias, Bill. And who are the people? And you brought this up. Well, who is at this game? You have chosen to forgo Game 7 of the ALCS to be at this game. I still think it would be weird. I think it would be a weird vibes, and maybe that is how the prophecy is fulfilled. There's the legendary Kevin Clark tweet that every Seahawks game is weird. And when I was watching this game, I was like, there was the safety stuff. It's not that weird. I guess there was like the safety to not safety to drop. It was like, but like the run stopping them like we thought, the pass rush getting home like we thought, Will Anderson gets strip sack. It's kind of what we thought, sort of normally. And maybe that was the weirdness, just surrounding the stadium so that we kept the streak alive.
That's fair. You bring this man on for his quantitative mind, his statistical analysis, and then we're talking about prophecies. We're talking about forgetting interceptions and overcoming with big throws. This man has multitudes. He contains multitudes. Do not pigeonhole Seth Walder as a numbers geek. This is a man who knows about prophecies, all kinds of stuff related to the National Football League. Seth, where can people check out the work you do each and every week?
You can check out my work on ESPN.com and follow me on Blue Sky. I'll post it there too.
Awesome. Seth, thank you so much.
Thanks, Bill.